Welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast, hosted by Dave Roberts. Humanity possesses a unique skill, the ability to pass knowledge from one generation to the next. This podcast embraces that ability, offering learning opportunities through conversations with extraordinary guests. Dave aims to leave a positive mark on individuals around the world. So before you dive into today's episode, please share this podcast with your network, including friends, family, and colleagues. And please consider leaving a rating or review. Your support makes all the difference.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Teaching Journeys Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, and today it is my pleasure to have as my guest Janelle Miller Moravek. Janelle is a nonprofit leader and mental health advocate. She has led youth and family counseling as executive director since 2009, driving its growth and impact across Lake County, Illinois. With a deep commitment to increasing access to mental health services, she oversees strategy, programming, and operations while fostering strong partnerships throughout the community. Janelle plays a key leadership role in the region, serving on the board of the Lake County Alliance for Human Services and co-chairing the Lake County Behavioral Health Action Team. Her prior experience includes developmental roles at Carmel Catholic High School and Barat College. She holds a BA in French Studies from Wesleyan University and lives in Libertyville with her husband and 3 children. And Janelle, somewhere in between all of this, you have time for sleep and coffee in the morning.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, now my kids are all in college and beyond. So, yeah, I have leisurely mornings.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, with our kids have long been out of the house. My wife, Sherry, and I have those leisurely mornings as well, too, which is pretty cool. But before we begin, we got to give a shout out to a couple of different people. Anastasia Lipsky and Lena Gomez, I believe that's her last name. I
Yes.
just know her as Lena. For facilitating the arrangements to get you on the podcast. Anastasia is just a great podcast agent. She takes great pride in vetting podcast hosts and making sure that her clients are matched up with the appropriate host. And I was thrilled when she told me that you had an interest in being a guest contributor because I resonate with what you're doing, in your life and professionally. And I think we're going to have a great conversation.
Oh, I know so. It's going to be great. Yeah.
Janelle, my first question for
Yeah.
you is, my understanding, you grew up in a culture where people didn't talk much about feelings. So what led you to step into the mental health space, and how has that shaped the way you lead?
Yeah. So I'm a Gen Xer, and I think many of us didn't talk about our feelings. We didn't have that vocabulary. I have this memory of the summer before I went away to college, having incredible acid reflux and not understanding why. And no one gave me the words or the tools to use. I didn't realize I had a lot of anxiety. I was a really high functioning, anxious person. And, fast forward, and I went away to college and got married, and I was working as a fundraiser. And then my husband and I, we decided that we wanted to start a family. So was looking for a part-time fundraising job, and those aren't easy to get. And there was this little organization, and a board member actually at Carmel High School connected me with the organization. She sat on both boards, and she's like, "Hey, I think you might be really happy over here." And so I interviewed with the board and the executive director, and it's like, "Yeah, I can raise money for you. Not easy peasy, right? Easy. You're small. I'm used to big. It's all the same." And so I started there, and over time have really accidentally become this firm believer in the work we do, the need for the work. I see the magic here happen. I see lives being changed, being saved. And I see what gets in the way of people getting the help that they need. And as I've evolved in my career and gotten older, and my kids have gotten older, we've become this informal resource to my network, my personal network, of them reaching out and saying, I'm struggling with this. What's your recommendation?
Yep.
And so I've just started talking about things because I feel like it's those mom conversations, those coffee conversations, when we're just talking about things, you're like, this is what I did. You might take something, not that I'm saying how to do it, but everyone's experience is different. But what I've done and how I'm talking about it might give you some ideas
Yeah.
about where you can start. And I know things that you don't know. So I've really come to be doing this more and more, talking about accessing mental health care and why it's a problem, because it's a problem.
Oh, absolutely. I worked in the addictions field from 1986 to 2012 and access. A single point of entry, Janelle, was always an issue. It's like a lot of times clients did not know which point of access to open up to get the centralized services that they needed. Plus, resources have always been an issue. There's always been more individuals, whether they're young or old, that have needed treatment than there are resources to provide it, which is
Yes.
why for what you do in terms of being kind of like the go-to referral source and here's some resources that you can access, it's important because, and then you can probably from there also direct individuals to the best single point of access depending on the
Mhm.
services that they need for both children and families. So, and you mentioned, and I can identify with this as somebody who's 70 years old. I mean, we grew up knowing that feelings were kind of the enemy. You kind of didn't acknowledge feelings. Feelings that were equated to vulnerability and weakness, and you just kind of sucked it up, put on a brave face,
Hold
and
on.
did what you needed to do. I have found with the young adults that I have worked with now as an adjunct professor at Utica University, especially with the young males, the Gen Z males, they seem to be more forthcoming with their feelings than our generation was. Have you found that to be the case? Am I assuming this correctly in with our
Yeah, I think
generation?
that the young people are always the hope, right? Because they are much more comfortable talking about their challenges, the help that they're getting. I think it's especially challenging for young men today. I have a 19-year-old son, and when raising him, right, fifth grade on, there are absolutely no resources or supports for young men. I had two girls before that, and there are so many books, resources, programs for girls. Boys, not so much. So I think in general, the generation, there's a lot less stigma. They have better vocabularies for assigning words to what they're going through, which makes it, because they have the words, they have the understanding, right? Which means that they're able to say, I struggle with this, or this is really impacting me. Doesn't mean they know what to do next, but they definitely have a better vocabulary than I did when I was their age. And I still think they have even more barriers sometimes than other generations do.
Well, yeah, I mean, just from the college standpoint, John, I remember my student loans were like $3,000. That doesn't even cover books now for a college student. Plus, they're dealing with so much more than I had to deal with at my age. They're dealing with 24-hour news. They're dealing with the internet. They're dealing with social media. A lot of our young adults, and I'm sure you've seen this, present with depression and anxiety for a lot of different reasons. It might be due to generational trauma. It might be due to the environmental situations that have impacted their well-being. But that's why it's just so important that we have the resources necessary to deal with them. And quite frankly, college campuses their mental health services can still be more developed, and it doesn't reach all the students in a timely fashion that it needs to reach. So I'm all for what you're doing for resource access. Speaking of access to services, what do clinicians need to know when it comes to access to services for young emerging adults in the mental health system?
Yeah, so when I talk about barriers in general to accessing and getting that help, I think about affordability. I think about geographic access, right? So unfortunately, affordability is the number one determinant of where you're going to get your treatment. So if you're a commercial, if you get your insurance through your employer or your family does, you're going to want to look for someone who's in network.
Yep.
And that's really hard because a lot of clinicians these days don't take insurance. So in Illinois, over half of the therapists in the behavioral health care and substance abuse treatment, they don't take insurance. So that means you're paying out of pocket. If you access your care through Medicaid, which 1 in 4 children here in Illinois does, try finding a provider that takes Medicaid. We're back to affordability, right? If you're paying out of pocket. A counseling session is expensive. Here where I live, it can be anywhere between $140 and $260 an hour every week. Try finding a place that has a sliding fee scale. Affordability is huge for young people, right? They're 18, so maybe they're covered by their parents. Maybe they're covered on their university plan. Maybe they're on Medicaid because they were, a youth in care. And then add to that, they're might be away at college. And that means that they are away from their support network, not just their family and their friends. But if they had been working with a provider and they switched states, now they can't see that provider anymore because our licensure is by state. So while that we're making progress on the policy level, not all licensures can practice across state lines.
Yeah.
So, for example, here in my practice, we're in Illinois. So if a student stays in state, we can continue services and do it via telehealth and visit with them when they come back for holidays in person. But if they go over the border, like my son's just across the border in Wisconsin, we can't talk to them. And so I feel like a lot of teenagers and young adults have grown up without some foundational skills of resilience and independence.
Yes.
And there are lots of reasons for that. But I think that a lot of it starts in those elementary school years. Listen, and I'm not blaming anybody. I'm seeking to understand. And I think the systems that we have to take care of our children do not do right by our kids. So we are no longer the society where you go to school until 3 and then you're playing in the neighborhood, while and then you come home for dinner. Like that's just not reality for most families who are 2 working parents. And so they need to put the kids somewhere while they're working. And so children are booked from whenever they go to school until they come home at night. They don't have any free time.
Yep.
Recesses are 20 minutes, right? And so that's just not enough time. And then they come home and no wonder they're dysregulated, right? They've had to keep themselves together. And then we need them to do homework and chores and maybe an activity. We don't have a reasonable workload for our children. They also never have that opportunity to sit with themselves and figure things out. There's a really interesting research being done in Australia around recess and how long it takes for children to benefit from that creative play. And it's like a minimum of 40 minutes.
Mhm.
They spend the first 20 minutes just figuring out the rules. And then you need to get them into that next
Yep.
mode of play in order for them to start using all of those critical thinking, problem solving, all of those things that we get from play. So we don't ever give our children the opportunity to have those things. So now I think one of the reasons we have such an anxious, depressed generation is that our children have never had the chance to develop those foundational
Mhm.
identities of self-worth and I can do this and I have done this and I've fallen down and I know I can get up because they've just never had the chance to do it. Then they go away to college and the stakes are really high,
Yep.
really high, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my heart goes, and listen, my kids are 23, 22, and 19. It is so hard.
Yeah, and I mean, I was as you were talking, I was thinking 20 minutes of recess in pretty much an 8-hour day isn't enough for anybody to recalibrate. I mean, corporations now are building in 20-minute power naps to their routine to get people recalibrated and recharged. But what I like what they're doing with Australia, what I heard is that they're looking at recess as an extension of the classroom environment.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you want to teach kids how to cooperative play, negotiating over particular toys to
Yeah.
play with and for how long, 20 minutes isn't enough. But recess and even spending time out in therapy outside in nature gives those students an opportunity, one, to develop those skills. But secondly, we also know the benefit of being outside and being in nature, what it does
Yes.
to our overall physical and mental well-being.
Yes.
And then, right, kids are coming home. They're dealing with, if they're in an unhealthy home situation, or dealing with family strife and things of that nature, and they got homework to do. So they never have an opportunity to sit with themselves and develop those skills. I would love to see, every school system, elementary, middle school, high school, build in every class 5 to 10 minutes of meditation and mindfulness before they start their day and before they start their class.
I think,
I would love to see that.
yeah, I think it doesn't even have to be 5 or 10 minutes. It could be 2.
Yep.
I also, right, this is one of my favorite topics. I would also love to see manageable work, right? We talk all about manageable work in the workforce, but, you know, right now in our schools, high schools in particular, it's it's not necessarily parents putting the pressure on. It's the kids bringing the pressure on themselves. You know, my daughter wanted to take 7 AP classes.
Yeah.
"Oh, you are not taking 7 AP classes. Choose everybody else's." I said, "Not you." Right? It, and listen, it's at the end of the day, that's all fine. You can do it, but at what cost?
Mhm.
Right? And it's the stakes just getting, it's this never enough, right? It's I'm never good enough. There's always more. What are you chasing?
Yeah.
Right? And then you get out into the workplace and it's really unstructured.
Hmm. Yeah.
I'm just saying.
If you give them manageable workloads, they can learn how to structure and plan out their time. If you're putting them in a situation where you're giving them so much work that you're putting them in a position where they're going to fail, they're not going to learn critical thinking. What they're going to learn is crisis management stuff to just get through. And that's not going to serve them long term. If anything, they'll burn out long term if they're operating just, from a crisis management perspective.
Right. Well, and isn't it interesting? My outreach director goes out into the high schools for wellness days, and she loves asking the kids, "How many hours of sleep did you get?" Right? And so we asked that for last year, and then this year now we're asking, "How many mental health days did you have to take?" So we're in this, like, go really hard, and then then you need a day to
Mhm.
recover, but then you're farther behind. So now you go, like, what happened to just a steady, regular cadence and these are the things we talk about here with my staff, for it's a marathon, not a sprint. So what's your cadence? How are you going to sustain for the long term and come back not just tomorrow, but next week, next month, next year, and show up and do the work?
Yeah.
Because it's 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 hard and you have
Yeah.
to keep showing up. So when are you taking vacation? How, make sure you're budgeting your sick days so that you can use them throughout the year, right? Manage your boundaries, right? You make sure that you're disconnecting. We have all this great technology. I
Mhm.
can access my work email, my work phone on my personal cell phone. Doesn't mean I should, right? So making sure that my employees know they have permission
Mhm.
to disconnect at night. We have backups. There's always backup, someone on call, but disconnect, have your have your personal life so that you can come back, because I need my people to stay so that we can help all the people. Right now, there aren't enough providers. In Illinois, we only have 24% of the workforce we need. So, yeah, there's not enough to go around. How are we gonna stay in it?
And I know one of the things you're concerned about is strengthening the behavioral health workforce. And what changes would you propose to do that? What would those changes do to promote morale, engagement with the mission, and also, lack of turnover?
Yeah. Oh, there are a couple of things that in Janelle's dream world happens. Reimbursement rates are at cost.
Yep.
So right now, most reimbursers, so insurance companies and the government, don't reimburse providers at cost. It's below cost. How much? Depends on the provider. But what would happen if all of a sudden everyone was paid at cost? Well, then people would perhaps view this field as a legitimate, viable option. And there's a lot of interest in it, but quite frankly, people can't afford to work in it because it doesn't pay a living wage. So what if you flipped and had better reimbursements, paid people better, then you'd not only help them stay in their jobs, but you'd also attract more people. So that would be the number one thing is everybody, government, private insurance, reimburse at cost. Ideally above cost, right? Because then we can invest in the systems that support the work. And relax licensure rules a little bit. I'm not saying reduce the quality, but relax the rules. So, for example, we can practice across state lines, right?
Yes.
Wouldn't that definitely would make access easier for consumers, but also think about families, military families, a family that gets transferred. If they have to go back, take more classes to renew their license, that's a barrier, right? And now you've lost that worker.
Yep.
So kind of looking at those rules and making it easier.
Yeah.
Those are the top two things I would do.
Yeah, those make perfect sense. I'm a licensed master social worker, and I know there's certain states in New York that have reciprocal licensing agreements with New York State, but not all states do. And as
Right.
far as I'm concerned, if you've mastered the competencies as a social worker, as a licensed professional in one area, why should you have to go reprove yourself to another area, to another
Right?
state? You shouldn't. I mean, once licensed, those skills, social work direct practice skills or psychology direct practice skills or prevention specialist skills, those are universal regardless of licensing requirements. We're not going to lose those.
There are licensure requirements for continuing education units that you have to complete so many in different competency areas, right?
Yeah.
In order to renew your license. So they're mandating, right? Keeping up with changes in the field. Yeah, I'm with you. I don't understand. And I say that, and I at the same time, I do understand it's an infrastructure issue, right? So in the state of Illinois, there's a huge backlog at the state, right, Department of Professional Regulation because that department hasn't been able to update their systems. It's a manual process. In today's day and age, we're waiting for someone literally to look at the paper on his desk. And that's a huge barrier when it comes to people waiting for their license approvals.
Yeah.
That means, they aren't able to evolve. And yeah, it's a hot mess.
Yeah, it is. And, we like to profess, I think a lot of people like to profess that we have a mental health care system, but in a lot of ways we really don't.
Oh, no, there's no system. It's a scatterboard. You were talking about, a point of entry. There should be no wrong door to treatment.
No.
But I think there are so many doors. People don't know which one to go to for what. What I have come to realize more and more is folks don't understand that the behavioral healthcare system does not mirror the physical healthcare system. So here where I live, there are 3 or 4 major systems that have physicians, urgent care, right? Hospitals, standalone emergency rooms, and everything is beautiful. You keep your doctors in your network, you use everything, it's all there. Behavioral healthcare is not like that. There is no big system. We're not in the existing systems. And the 4 systems we have here in Lake County, one has psychiatric beds in my county. Like, that's a problem. So if you are in crisis, for example, you might go to an emergency department in one system. Then they will say, okay, you probably need, if you don't need inpatient care and get transferred out of county, they'll say, okay, well, we're going to refer you to a partial hospitalization program. And so you're going to go to an independent, standalone, likely for-profit organization. You'll complete your partial hospitalization and then you'll step down to intensive outpatient. And that's a long time. That's over the course of several weeks. Then when you want to do outpatient treatment and just kind of be in maintenance, you got to find a different provider.
Jesus.
And while you might have referrals, and you're also, by the way, going to have to find your own psychiatrist. And there aren't enough of those. So it's a 6 to 12 week wait to get your initial appointment with a psychiatrist. So now you're hoping that maybe, if it's depression or anxiety, maybe your primary care or your family medicine provider will be comfortable enough with prescribing that they'll help you. But if not, you have to find a physician, a psychiatrist, or you can pay out of pocket and find and easily get to a nurse practitioner. But they generally tend to stay out of network. So you're going to pay out of pocket. And those are, there's no system there. We're not connected. And each provider has a little bit of a different specialty, which I know because I've been doing this for 25 years, right? Yeah. But I know that if you need a partial hospitalization program for an eating disorder, this is the right fit for you. But if you need it for OCD, you're going to go here.
Yep.
And if you need it for depression, you're going to go here. The average person doesn't know that. I only know it because I've been doing this for a long time and I know all the players. It's such a problem.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned psychiatrists. One psychiatrists are trained essentially from a medical model. So if you go to a psychiatrist, they're going to prescribe meds. And
yes.
For many young adults, medications aren't indicated. If you rule in developmental factors and you take a look at development context and what's going on in their lives before you make a recommendation for a service referral. But the other thing with psychiatrists, there's not too many psychiatrists that are that really put an emphasis on clinical skills first to look at medication as a last resort.
Right.
The other thing, if I were a client, I was told, well, you could go here, and I'm being bounced around like a ping pong ball, the message I'm going to get is that nobody wants to take care of my needs.
Right.
That I'm just an intrusion. It's kind of like that parallel treatment system that they used to have with addictions and mental health. If you went to an addiction specialist, they'll look and say, I think your mental health symptoms are a little bit more prevalent. I think you need to deal with this first before you deal with addiction. So we're going to kick you back to your mental health counselor. Mental health counselor says the same thing. We're going to kick you back to your addictions counselor. The client gets a message that they're not worthy. They're not worthy of being in anybody's system.
Right.
So let's do something that's kind of integrated where like everybody's on the same page. We take a look at a specific problem and we match the individual up with the services that most meet their need, not just throw them here randomly and here randomly. And it's like, throwing crap on a wall and see what's going to stick first. That's not the way to run any kind of system.
No. But it's really hard to change the system, right? So in that beautiful world that you've described where you can get sort of holistic treatment for your what we call, right, co-occurring disorder, mental health, substance use, we need, when you think about it, like in Illinois, this year, and it took years to get here, they're finally merging the different departments. There's a department for substance use treatment, and there's a department for mental health. They're finally merging these two departments into one entity.
It's about time.
That's messy, but it needs to be done.
Yep.
But also think about the educational systems that are preparing the clinicians, right? Those need to adapt.
Yes.
It's not that they're not trying, but the world is adapting. The world is evolving much faster than our educational systems can keep up. There's always a lag, but the lag right now I feel like is really big. And it's frustrating. But I think the more people understand that the why that's behind why it's so hard to get help, why it is this way, will help them be good consumers and good advocates themselves and help them inform the people who are making the decisions,
Mm-hmm.
right? If folks don't understand, what no more subsidies for marketplace plans means, if they don't understand that, they're not going to be informed voters, right?
Mm.
So we need more information.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, we do. And I think you're right. I think our educational systems, right from from early on, right through college, need to better prepare our young adults for the challenges they're going to see in the real world. And that's why I think you're seeing a lot of educational institutions now looking at their curriculums and saying, what can we do to revise our curriculum so that we can prepare our young adults for making an impact in the
yeah,
workforce where it needs to be.
I would love to see all of the adults and for example, at a college campus, like the RAs, the student leaders, all of those folks trained in mental health first aid, right? Wouldn't that be gorgeous if every single adult knew how to identify, respond, and refer?
Mm.
It shouldn't only be left for clinicians and professionals. There's a whole, right, mental health is a continuum. And yes, you need a professional when you get to a certain point, but there's a whole range of of problems and symptoms that are mild
Mm-hmm.
that we can do better at equipping individuals to manage. And it doesn't have to be a professional to teach them. It can be an RA, it can be a high school teacher, it can be fill in the blank, a parent.
Well, that type of model, I mean, encourages community involvement, collaboration across not only across disciplines, but just across, socioeconomic status, occupations. And yeah, I mean, if you take a look at, and even with some, developmental assessments, to assess early childhood issues. Some parents and caregivers can actually administer those tools, and then they report back to
Hmm.
either the teacher or the clinician, and they talk about that. So if we can do that in certain areas, why can't we kind of encourage and create an atmosphere where everybody can be their own advocate. Everybody can be able to assess and report. I mean, it just makes it, ethically, we need to collaborate. Ethically, we
Yeah.
need to collaborate with our clients on treatment plans, on, what they see as being the
Yes.
best course of treatment for them. So why can't we extend it to a community model?
Right? That would mean we all have to work together. And who's got time for that?
What's going to be more time efficient? Plugging endless holes in walls because of crisis, because of a
Right.
broken system. We're putting in the time to work together collaboratively, pooling our strengths for the betterment of our young adults who need services.
Right. In general, that is, Dave, I mean, I think the biggest weakness in the American healthcare system is it's all driven by crisis care.
Mm-hmm.
And until we make this switch and invest in these prevention, right, it's going to be hard. I say that. And then I also say, I don't think I've ever taken a CPR class, yet I know what CPR is supposed to look like, right? I've never had to do mouth to mouth, but I still know you're supposed to pinch the nose, right? And tilt the head. And I know that if someone gets cut and it's gaping, they're going to need stitches. We managed to acquire this knowledge about physical health and physical health emergencies we don't have around mental health.
Yep.
And I don't know how to get there with increasing that behavioral health literacy, I'm going to call it.
Yeah. I think we have to increase that literacy. It's the only way we're going to be able to do it because, I even take a look at, as a clinician with diagnosis, I mean, the first step of any type of difference of diagnosis is you rule out any physical or any change, social or emotional changes that are going on because of crisis. You factor that in and, to see if the behavior continues after the crisis is abated. But a lot of times people don't do that. PCPs, you talk about diagnosing, they get it wrong, I think 50 to 80% of the time, with diagnosis.
And I'm curious as we're talking about this, is that because of the billing requirement that services have to be demonstrated to be medically necessary? And you do that by diagnosing. And so from that very first visit, you have to assign a diagnosis in order to prove medical necessity in order to get reimbursed. So maybe we need to go back to the question that you asked earlier, what would I change in the system? Maybe I would add into there, maybe we should ease up on the requirement of needing to have a diagnosis at the first session. Because if someone presents with trauma or has experienced trauma, their symptoms can look like a disorder.
Yeah.
And you won't know until you get into that treatment.
Yeah.
Because the person's not going to share until they trust you enough.
Absolutely. They're going to self-disclose to the extent that they're comfortable with, and self-disclosure and trust is built over time. And the other thing is people live very different in crisis, Janelle, than they do otherwise. So to diagnose somebody with a mental health diagnosis when they're in crisis is really kind of misinformed because everything in crisis is discombobulated. Everything, our emotional well-being, our mental well-being is compromised because of what we're going through at the moment and all the emotions and the energy that's attached to that. So you stabilize the crisis and then you look at the behavior and then, okay, how do we proceed?
Yeah.
And
that makes me think of the adolescents who have chronic anxiety, right? And it's untreated, right? We know, because we know more and more, it does things to the brain that underscores the need to address it earlier and in all different kinds of settings.
Yeah.
Workplaces as well as colleges. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done.
Yes.
There's
Lots of opportunities.
Lots of opportunities as well, too. It's just, I think, creating situations and where the individuals, the kind of the people with the right skills or the more developed skills or the informed skills come together and decide that this system needs to be fixed. And it hasn't been fixed in the years I've been in human services. And the work that you're doing to try to influence change in your area is needed. It's impressive, but that needs to be consistent throughout the country because not everybody's going to live in Illinois, so we have,
Right.
even though you got the Chicago Bears and you got Garrett's popcorn and you got all those really, really, really good things, the hot dogs,
Deep dish pizza.
deep dish pizza, you got all these good things. You don't have room for the entire population of the U.S. to live in Illinois. So
No, this is true.
hopefully what you're doing with your program gets modeled, it gets just really proliferated throughout the United States. I got to ask you another question. You've been with YFC for a long time, since 2009. That's a lot. That's a lot of years for anybody to stay as an executive director in one nonprofit. What keeps you coming back?
Yeah. It hasn't stopped being fun. I actually came to YFC in 2000 as the development director. And then in 2009, stepped into this role. Asked for it, was given the opportunity to give it a whirl. And I love it. I love my job. And I think a couple things keep me coming back. And that's the people, both the people I work with internally and the people, external stakeholders. So my board, my donors. It's it's really powerful when you, and I get to do this in my role, is to understand what motivates people to make a difference and to work with them to do that is really amazing. And I feel like I've had maybe 3 or 4 different jobs since 2009 because the organization has evolved. So I actually think of my time here in eras a little bit like Taylor Swift. Each step along the way, I might be doing the same things, but it's different people. It's a different size organization. It's a little bit different. So that's been fun because I get to try again and again until I get it right. And it's never the same thing twice. So when I stepped into this role, our budget was about $680,000. And today we're just under 3 million. And we have 3 locations. So it's a really different organization than it was in 2009. It's a different organization than it was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Working on policies and budgeting. It's a different organization. There are different problems, but I'm able to take all the things that I learned and then do something new, right? To build on that. I think that's a really long answer, but that's what keeps me. It hasn't gotten old. It's still fun. So it keeps me coming back. Or in this case, not looking to leave.
And Janelle, I got to tell you, there's no such thing as a long answer on this program. So and I just go with it. So, and that's a great answer because obviously you've had a chance to function in a variety of different capacities, develop your skills across multiple roles. And I think that type of creativity and the ability to grow, I think keeps people staying in a lot of organizations where they want to feel like they're making a difference and they want to feel like they're growing in the process.
Right. And I would argue as well that it has greatly benefited my organization. We would not have the kind of growth that we have had if we had a new executive director every 5 to 7 years. Because it takes, in a leadership role, it takes the person 1 to 2 years to get comfortable in their role. And then the real work can start. So if you look at over a period of, say, 15 years, if you have 3 executive directors, each of 5 years, you're getting really 9 years, 3 of creativity.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if it's the same person over 15 years, give them 2 years at the beginning, now you're getting 13 years of creativity and growth.
Yeah.
So I think it's certainly, it's something that I wish more executive directors, leaders, and organizations would think about is what can we do to keep the leaders? Because, well, I would say in human services, no one is a widget, right? You can't just drop them in and have them perform right away because our work is all about establishing relationships and that takes time. In leadership roles, it's 1 to 2 years, right? So you're losing that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if they have a time frame of 5 to 7 years, that gives them 3 to 5 years to implement the mission. Then if they move on, staff has to get used to another style of leadership, a new set of objectives. That can be very unsettling for staff. And to me, and I don't have statistics on this, Janelle, to me, that type of unsettled organizational culture would contribute to me trying to look for another job or another organization that has more stability and the room for growth.
Right. And then it's also not good for your community that you're serving because all of the relationships that your staff have with their clients, it isn't very common for us to treat the same person over their lifetime.
Yeah.
Right? They come in for an episode of treatment. We send them back. They graduate. And then they come back, especially with kids, right? As they hit different developmental stages. They might hit middle school. They might need different coping skills. And then they hit high school and right. And they're more complex creatures. And so
Yep.
they need different things. It's really not uncommon to see someone come back, and you could only do that and serve that person so that the person doesn't have to tell their same story,
Yes.
right? To a different person every time. Now, I'm not saying as clinicians that we remember every single story, but, right, we have notes that we can go back on. We can review, right? And it's easier to make that reconnection.
Mhm.
It's really important. At the end of the day, I don't think it matters if you're a social worker or a professional counselor or marriage and family therapist. If you're working in the outpatient setting and that door closes, you're all doing the same work. And you just got to get it done. What matters is the relationship with the person.
Yep. And you can't replace presence as well too. So a therapist might have skills, but presence might be the most important thing to that young adult, particularly with grief. And one of the things that I discuss with my students in my death, dying, and bereavement class at UK University is that grief tends to reinvent itself throughout the developmental life cycle as children begin to grow developmentally, as their cognitive skills become more developed, their abstract skills become more defined. How they viewed grief as a 5-year-old is much different. They're going to view it much differently as a
Yes.
12-year-old. And they're going to
Yes.
re-experience that all over and over again, which is why during those transitions, I think it's important to have that consistency with the therapist because they've been through the previous developmental stages and they know basically what they need to do to help that young adult get through the next developmental stage and the challenges with that. So, yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, consistency and is important,
Yeah.
to establish that relationship. So,
And that's why at YFC, unlike I think some other places, when we have a clinician who does leave, we allow them to take their clients with them if they want to, if they can, right? Because we know that client's relationship is not with YFC, it's with that particular therapist. And that's in the best interest of the client. Right now, sometimes they're retiring or they're going to a setting where they can't bring their clients. That's a different story. But in my experience, generally, what happens most often is a clinician will go into private practice, right?
Mhm.
That we will encourage them to take their clients with them because that's what's best.
Yeah, and I think a lot of things that I saw in the addictions field was ownership of clients, whether it be through individual therapists or teams. And there's no such thing. We do what's in the best interest of the client. I think it's great that you tell you tell the client, look, if you want to go where your clinician is going, we're not going to stop you. That sends a message that the client is our most important commodity, for lack of a better way to put that. Your
Yeah.
needs are more important than the organization's or therapist's individual needs. That sends a
Yeah.
message of empowerment. That sends a message of, I mean something, I'm worth something.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great message to send out to any client, and also a great message for the organization and
Yeah.
the stakeholders and the staff and everybody that's involved. So, Janelle, I could talk to you for about another 2 hours.
Good.
I'm having a blast, but we got to wrap up, and I got a couple more questions for you before we do.
Okay.
First question I have is, you've left our audience with so many good things today about you, your work, about
so.
YFC, about your perceptions of improving the mental health care system. But if you're going to leave us with one ultimate takeaway today, one ultimate teaching that you want to leave with us, what would that be today?
Don't wait. If you think, right, if you think that you could benefit from talking to somebody, don't wait, just do it. You don't have to. We've talked a lot about trauma and things happening, but you don't have to have those things happen to want or need mental health services. So I would say I want to make sure that everybody understands, right? It also can help you live the life you want to lead.
Yep.
So don't wait for it to get bad. Even if you're curious, take a screening, see how you're doing, right? Get an assessment. Like now I'm loving Illinois. They very quietly said that commercial insurance has to cover one mental health assessment a year, right? Get your checkup, see how you're doing.
Yeah. It doesn't hurt. It's better to err on the side of caution.
Right.
And I've always told my students this, diagnosis doesn't need to be permanent. I mean, I think every year a person's diagnosis should be reevaluated and the progress made reflects a change in that diagnosis, because diagnosis and labeling is very stigmatizing, and that goes with an individual. And people aren't going to have generalized anxiety disorder for the rest of their lives. That could change.
Right.
It's a matter of that constant reassessing as well too. I think that's also important. But yeah, don't wait. Ask for help, and be confident that there is going to be somebody there that's going to be willing and able to take care of your needs. So, Janelle, if individuals want to contact you, find out more about what the services YFC has to offer, what's the best way for them to do that?
Oh, follow me on LinkedIn. I do a lot of my talking on LinkedIn. And so, follow me on LinkedIn. I publish a long article every month talking a bigger topic, and, always am highlighting things that are going on, amazing stories from here at YFC. So LinkedIn is the best place to find me.
And I'll make sure that your contact information gets in the episode notes when we go live. So
terrific.
Janelle,
thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Janelle, for just a wonderful conversation today. I enjoyed sharing my morning coffee with you this morning. I hope we can do this again in the future.
That would be a delight, because I feel the same way. We are clearly kindred spirits.
Yes, I believe so too. So, and with that, that's a wrap on another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, wishing you peace.